9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game as we navigate through the final day of July. And as I've been teasing all week long, that means tomorrow we can officially say not only is there actual football being played tomorrow with the Hall of Fame game, starting things off for the NFL preseason, but also can say football will be played in the month of August with South Carolina kicking things off against Old Dominion 31 days away from now on August the 31st. Of course, at the end of this week, we're going to get things rolling with South Carolina's camp as we look to learn what this team's going to be. That has been kind of a main point really this entire offseason when we talk about this team is just all of the true unknowns and wondering how position battles are going to shake out, wondering how reps are going to be divvied up, and really learning what the identity of this team, particularly when it comes to offense, is going to be. We heard from Dow Loggins last week out at a Birdies with Beamer, and Loggins is phenomenal whenever we get a chance to talk to him because he's very detailed. He gives good, long, thought-out answers, and sometimes may kind of straddle that line between giving away too much information and trying to protect what his playbook is. But even in the conversations that we've had with Dow Loggins, we're still sitting here scratching our head exactly at what this offense is going to be. We have a pretty good idea that it's going to certainly incorporate a lot more running because of the skill set that Lenore Sellers brings to the table and the dynamic of having a guy like Rocket Sanders who comes from a place in Arkansas where he was running a lot of a run-heavy offense with a guy like KJ Jefferson as his quarterback, but we don't know exactly how that's going to be schemed up. We don't know who the main targets at wide receiver are going to be, and so on and so forth. And again, as we get into fall camp, a lot of the work to be done is finalizing a lot of those positions as we get into that or later on in the week. And quarterback is really a formality more than anything else. Beamer named Lenore Sellers the starting quarterback coming away from spring, which we know unless something catastrophic happens, that Lenore Sellers isn't going to lose the starting job. It's more about, keeping up this idea of competition, right? To where Sellers doesn't get complacent and realizes that he still has to go out there and battle every single day to make sure that he's at his best, going through fall camp, which I don't think would be a problem. Again, everything that we know about Lenore Sellers and talking to him and what the coaches have said, teammates have said, he's got a good head on his shoulders. And I don't think even if you would have just gone ahead and named him the true starter coming away from spring, I don't think that would have affected him, mentally in a negative way, that he just, ends up going through the motions or isn't trying as hard as we go through these next couple of weeks of practice. But I can understand, why Beamer's doing it the way that he's doing it. And we should learn, him being the official starter, I assume, in the couple days leading up to Old Dominion, because if you've already let it be a quote-unquote competition up to this point, why not let it go on for a couple of more weeks? Running back seems pretty straightforward initially when it comes to Rocket Sanders being the bell cow back, assuming that he is healthy, which all indications this entire offseason are that he has been right in line with where they expected him to be as far as his overall recovery. And we're all excited to see him, put shoulder pads and a helmet on and go out there and actually start, taking contact. It's what happens after him that things get interesting. I think we lean towards Oscar Attaway being that number 2 guy, which in today's world of college football, with the way you rotate backs in and out, most places tend to kind of have a back by committee type of approach. So all these guys are going to get their opportunity out there on the field and get their opportunity to get touches. But how that's divvied up is going to be interesting to see because, again, how much do you give to Attaway when he's in there? Jordan Howe, what kind of skills does he bring to the table? How does that transition for him go from FCS up to SEC? And we obviously have seen, like last year with Mario Anderson, who transferred from D2 up to the SEC. He was able to make that transition. He certainly had his moments. Was definitely hampered by an offensive line that could have been a whole lot better. So it's not impossible by any means, but you would much prefer a guy making that transition at running back to be maybe your second or third option as opposed to what ended up being the main guy in the backfield for South Carolina last year. When we get down to wide receiver, it is just truly wide open, right? I mean, we have a sense of the guys that we think are going to be the main ones with Gage Larvadain, as he's the one that we've probably heard the most about in his time here on campus, going through spring and summer so far and everything like that, but we don't know that for sure. I think we're all anxiously anticipating what Nick Harbor is going to be and see what kind of progress he's made in his, off season, even though a lot of that was not spent primarily focusing on football. So that is a bit of a question mark. Jared Brown is somebody that everybody seems pretty excited about and the skill set that he brings to the table. Devon Campbell, who kind of came in to supplement the need to have one of those taller receivers on the outside, at least until Nick Harbor is ready to go. What kind of role does he play? Will he be featured a little more heavily out the jump, waiting for, Lenore Sellers to kind of come along in time? We don't know. And again, that's the biggest unknown on this team. Now, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic because not only do you have a whole flurry of new faces, these are a lot of guys that have played a significant amount of snaps in their respective careers up to this point, with Brown at Coastal Carolina, Gage Larvadain coming in, as well as Devon Campbell. These guys just have a ton of experience at their respective stops before coming to South Carolina, mixed in with guys like Harbor and Tyshawn Russell, who we saw get a little bit of experience a year ago, and seeing how they take a step up in year number 2. In addition to Mazeo Bennett, who is somebody that we've heard a lot about this entire offseason, and what he's been able to do through spring and everything like that. Now, again, kind of pump the brakes because we did hear similar things about Elijah Caldwell a season ago, and he just never ended up, getting on the field when the fall rolled around. So you're apprehensive about maybe somebody like Bennett until you actually see it happen on the field. But again, it's fair game for everybody, as this is truly a wide open competition when you talk about the wide receiver room. Tight end seems to be pretty locked in when it comes to Josh Simon and Brady Hunt kind of being your number 1 and number 2 guy. Again, Simon we saw as the 2 last year behind Trey Knox, and when Knox was down, he stepped up into that number 1 role at tight end, and I thought did a really solid job. Definitely an aggressive downhill type of runner when he gets the ball in his hands, that's for sure. And Brady Hunt, who again's been injured the past couple of years, but showed plenty of promise when he was at Ball State a couple of years ago when fully healthy, and somebody that from a size standpoint is exactly what you're looking for in that tight end role. And then offensive line, it seems to be that Vershawn Lee is the only real known commodity, I would guess, as you can definitively say, yes, he's absolutely going to take one of the spots, that being most likely the center position, which is his natural position anyway. And then you get pretty good feelings about guys in other spots like Kason Henry playing at right tackle, Tree and Show occupying the left tackle and respective right guard spots as well. But we don't know that for sure. That's why the competition is going to be ongoing. And really, you run into a good problem to have when you talk about South Carolina's offensive line, but there's just so many viable bodies within that room of guys that do have the opportunity to factor into that starting role. And again, as I've said many times, knock on wood, assuming everybody can stay healthy, you should have pretty decent depth at offensive line, which hopefully you won't need. But more than anything else, I think we all just desire for that starting 5 to stay routine and as close to the same as possible compared to what you dealt with a year ago with all the injuries and everything. Defensively, I mean, defensive line, the starting position doesn't necessarily matter because you're going to rotate guys in anyway in an ideal world. So, Boogie, TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway, DeAndre Jules, Michael Goodwin, all those guys are going to factor in multiple ways when it comes to how you rotate them in, and may end up splitting time between a lot of those guys depending on what you think they're going to be able to bring to the table. I look at the edge spot as a place that, again, needs a desperate improvement for where it was a year ago, but kind of similar to defensive line. You have the opportunity for a lot of these guys to factor in and, make an impact. So, yeah, you bring in the Kyle Kennards, you bring back Gilbert Edmonds as guys that should have no problem seeing the field. Brian Thomas Jr. Expected to be one of those that contributes quite a bit. Dylan Stewart, we're excited to see what he does in year number one. Desmond Zulu, who is somebody that I think we were a little more hopeful about last year and got on the field, but didn't make a huge impact. What's he going to do in year number two? But again, these are all going to be guys that kind of rotate in as you tend to do on defense. So they all have a fair opportunity to find their way onto the field. Linebacker, again, rotation is something that is going to, depend on a lot of what kind of scheme that you're going to end up running more than anything else. But even with that, whether you're in the 3-3-5 or the 4-2-5, you're going to be bringing in multiple guys to, play that linebacker spot. And again, a guy like Ben Martin Scott, who thrived in the 3-3-5 a year ago, has he done enough to maybe be that number one or two guy when it comes to playing the 4-2-5? We'll see. But you got Demetrius Knight, Bengali Kamara. You have Debo Williams. Mokaba is expected to be back for another year and ready to go. And then, what does Wendell Gregory and, J.R. Johnson do factoring into this mix? We'll have to see. But you certainly have a good amount of depth and experience in that linebacker room that should excite everybody when it comes to what they're going to be able to do on defense. Safety, seems pretty straightforward. Nick Eamon, DQ Smith, going to occupy the respective regular safety spots, and Jelon Kilgore should be expected to be in that nickel corner spot as well, as that kind of became his role, as the season rolled along last year after rotating through a couple of different guys. O.D. Fortune has one cornerback spot locked down, and then the other spot is a bit of a toss-up. You'd say Judge Collier probably has the lead on that, but Emery Floyd and Vakari Swain, all viable options in regards to potentially being in the mix for that starting role as well. And that's the really kind of true unknown as far as a starter to be named as we go through fall camp here with South Carolina. And then punter Kai Kroger, and then kicker, as far as we know, it's Alex Herrera until we see something otherwise. I know Mason Love comes in as a punter, but is going to have the opportunity to do some kicking as well. So how's that competition going to go? We'll certainly see. I think that's kind of an underrated storyline that we haven't paid as much attention to, but you move on from a guy that Mitch Jeter that was pretty consistent to somebody like potentially Alex Herrera, who's been on campus for a long time but never factored into that starting role. Why that is exactly, we will have to see, and hopefully there is no drop-off and special teams can get back to what we expect them to be, under Shane Beamer and now new special teams coordinator Joe D. Camillus. We'll move around the SEC a little bit coming up next. Billy Napier spoke to the media yesterday as Florida gets their fall camp rolling, had some interesting comments about a few different things. We'll get into that coming up. Want to remind you, we are rolling along with our best in Gamecock sports moments since the year 2000. Have another poll up on Twitter today, as we've had the prior 2 days, another one coming up tomorrow. We're going to take the 4 winners from this week, have another poll starting next week on August the 5th, and then we'll run that all week, and we'll talk about the ultimate winner of the best Gamecock moment since the year 2000 on Monday, August 12th. It's all sponsored by Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. Napier, sound from yesterday at Florida's fall camp. Coming up next on the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game.
I'm a firm believer that better people are better football players. And I think we'll prove that this fall.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday morning here on the game. That was the voice of Florida Gators head coach Billy Napier talking to the media yesterday. And, you know, we can often accuse Billy Napier of being a little bit dull. But was that maybe kind of a shot at Kirby Smart there? Better people make better football players. I'll be honest with you. For the sake of the rivalry, I'm here for it. Like I love pushing buttons a little bit. Again, Billy Napier could certainly improve things by maybe showing a little bit more personality down there in Gainesville. That is what coaches down there that are successful tend to have. And what's he got to lose at this point? As we do kind of think he's a bit of a dead man walking unless they can pull off a really, really good or at least solid season this year to rectify what the past couple of years have been like for them in Gainesville. And pressure on him, of course, as expected, is certainly at an all-time high. And he's somebody that, to my knowledge, this offseason, I don't know how much he's been asked about his job security. It's something I've not seen come up a lot. Yeah, certainly plenty of people have talked about it, including us here and plenty of people down there in Gainesville as well. But as far as Billy being asked directly what he thinks in regards to his job security, that's something that I've not seen a lot of until yesterday when he was asked the question directly by the media.
I mean, I think every year you got a set of problems, you know, whether you lack momentum or you have momentum, whether you've had a great offseason and you've coming off of a fantastic year, or maybe you struggled and didn't quite perform the way you'd like. You got to view each team as its own entity and kind of try to be objective about how you make decisions. Look, with leadership comes tough decisions, right? And I think every good movie, every good story, you know, has challenges, right? So we're right in the middle of this one. And I'm hopeful that the things we've done to make change will help us perform better. But I'm going to tell you, I'm a firm believer that sometimes you need to go through struggle, and we've done that, and I'm hopeful that it will be rewarding when we do accomplish some things of significance. So, you know, one thing about this game, I'll tell you, just big picture here from a perspective standpoint, this game, like most careers, are conditional, you know, and I'm a person of faith, and there's an unconditional element out there to life too. So I think it gives you some perspective at the same time.
You know, as he talked about there, is it kind of a darkest before the dawn situation when it comes to Florida? It certainly could be, where, again, the first 2 years, everything's looked pretty bleak up to this point. And again, there's a reason why we've been talking about him being on the hot seat pretty much this entire offseason, because that's all that he's shown us up to this point here. But I look at, you know, a guy like Eli Drinkwitz when he was out there in Missouri, where we were kind of maybe having a similar situation or similar conversation about him a year ago. Now, the difference is he had gotten a contract extension back in 2022, so that kind of told you he wasn't necessarily on the hot seat going into his fourth season out there in Missouri. And, you know, in the 3 years prior, 5-5, 6-7, and 6-7, nobody foresaw an 11-2 campaign coming out of him. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Florida, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. And one thing I've noticed, because, again, we've talked about it plenty, about how we think that Napier is on a scorching hot seat as of right now. And that was kind of the conversation a lot of people were having for a while in regards to him. But I've noticed here as of late, a lot of the very prominent voices that do talk about college football from a national standpoint are actually kind of advocating for Florida to maybe be a little bit better than what the general consensus thinks they're going to be. Greg McElroy of ESPN, J.D. Piquel yesterday projected them to go 7-5, which isn't phenomenal, but to be the best mark that Billy Napier had put up so far. And even our own guy, Dimitri Ravenos, who's going to join me coming up here in a couple minutes, talked about it earlier this week that he even thinks that Florida is going to be a little bit better than most people expect them to be. And again, it's not impossible. And I look squarely at a guy like Graham Mertz, who, again, I don't think people were fawning over necessarily when he was announced as transferring to Florida and to be their starting quarterback. But when you look at his numbers last year, extremely, extremely consistent. 2,900 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, had one of the highest completion percentages out of all starting quarterbacks across college football. So, no doubt he put in his best season yet in college football compared to the years that he had at Wisconsin the year before. So you only expect him to potentially get even better after having another offseason down there in the Florida program, in addition to the fact that he has exciting pieces around him there on offense. We know that he's getting back most of his receiving core. How's Eugene Wilson and Arliss Boardingham going to step up in their second years down there in Florida? Those are two guys that have potential to be among the best when it comes to the entire SEC in the skill sets they bring to the table. He's also getting back Chimry Dike, who he worked with when at Wisconsin. And those guys had a good rapport with one another. What does that add to that offense? And plenty of reason for optimism there. The concern is on defense, which was historically bad for the Florida Gators season ago, which is why they pretty much cleaned house on most of their defensive staff, save for the defensive coordinator in Austin Armstrong. They went out there, they brought in a lot of guys from the transfer portal. How's that going to work out? We don't know. They have, gone out and like I said, taken the incentive to try and change things to make it better. How's it work out? We'll see. And again, I don't know. I don't have the utmost confidence that Florida's going to be better. But again, I'm not saying that it's completely impossible that they could surprise a lot of people and maybe even save Billy Napier's job in the process. We'll certainly have to see. Again, Dimitri Ravenos is going to come up and join me next, as he does each and every Wednesday. Going to talk about a few things in regards to the Olympics, as we had a pretty historic moment for the U.S. women's rugby team yesterday, capturing the bronze medal. Reminder, once again, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway is back. It's your chance to win season tickets to all South Carolina home football, baseball, and men's women's basketball games for the upcoming sports calendar year. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Men's Clinic. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway tab to enter for your chance to win. Just like last year, we're going to take 3 finalists, bring you out to our summer golf event at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia coming up at the end of the month, and then we will announce the formal winner there. Again, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway live now on 1075thegame.com. Dimitri Ravenos coming up next on the halftime show. The Extra Point. Tyler headed along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
This is going to be the easier kick right down the middle.
There it is.
Oh,
there it is. Cedric with the conversion, and Team USA make history in Paris.
Oh, my God. That is amazing.
Alona Mar, the hands in the air. They've done what no other American rugby team in sevens have ever done before.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. As we do each and every week, we are joined by our guy, Dimitri Ravanos, as we talk all things going on in the world of sports. And as we've focused on a little bit earlier on this week when you were on the halftime show with me, a lot of Olympic talk. I've watched more of the more rugby this week than I have probably in my entire life up to this point.
Well, the ratings say that all of us have watched more Olympics than we have in, what is it, the last 3 Summer Olympics, that ratings are up. Ratings are up by 80% from the last Summer Olympic Games. It's crazy, man. And the rugby has been one of those breakout, like, I don't think American fans, and I'm including myself in this, I'm not pretending to be a rugby expert.
Sure.
I don't think any of us counted on just how much it can invoke those college football feelings when you have a big breakaway run like you did yesterday.
The funny thing about it, and not just watching the U.S. women's team who again got a bronze medal, first ever medal in the history of that program, just watching it in general, some of these other countries like Samoa and all those ones that we know are good at this kind of thing, I'm watching it thinking like, why isn't this more popular in America? Because this kind of gives you exactly what, the people that say, oh, football's gone too soft now. This is football without the helmets and shoulder pads. This is pure, like, unadulterated violence with a ball. You know what I mean? Like, I would think it would be more popular than it is.
It also, it's funny, I keep watching some of these, especially on the men's side, in the men's tournament and the women's tournament, both, they're already over. But I was watching some of those guys from Fiji, from New Zealand, and wondering, like, I don't know what it is the biggest rugby leagues in the world pay these guys, but certainly some NFL team could bring them in for a tryout at running back. And just maybe we have some that make NFL rosters, because these dudes have talent.
There was a running back with the 49ers a couple years ago. That's was, right. I think, an Australian rugby player, right?
Yeah, he was Australian. I think he was Maori, right? Like he was native Australian, where he did not look like you or I necessarily. But yeah, that dude, didn't he not last for it was like personal reasons, not athleticism. He had all the skill in the world.
Yeah, let me look.
As I recall,
I can't remember what his name was, but yeah, I think it's something along those lines, because I only remember seeing him in a handful of games before I'm assuming maybe went back to Australia. Let's see, Jared Hayne.
Yeah, and that was I think, I could be wrong about this, I think the Irish Rugby League is one of the like the Major League Baseball, so to speak, of rugby. And so I wonder, is this just a matter of our pounds or euros just stronger than the dollar enough that these guys don't even think about it? Is there something about rugby versus American football where American football seems a little more dangerous or a little more risky in their minds? I'm shocked that with all of the opportunity to not only earn a paycheck, but also earn marketing deals, that these guys are not more actively trying to get over to the NFL.
Yeah, they probably think the game's too weak and too soft.
Excuse me. So I wanted to bring this up to you.
All right.
That run yesterday, and while I say this, Tyler, I guess I need you to tell me what the name of the woman who actually made that mad dash to the end zone, what her name actually was. Because Alona Mar is the one we've been talking about. She was not the one that made this play. But this was insane. Australia is up 12-7. They are kicking off to the United States and get the U.S. down twice before the clock runs out. But as the clock is running out, as it hits 0, there is a length of the field sprint to secure the bronze medal.
Yeah, so this is Alex Cedric that had that game-winning score.
Yeah, so Alex Cedric's run, it's not for the gold, right? So sure. I think a lot of people will dismiss it, but watching it in real time was as much of a pound your chest, chant USA, USA moment
Sure.
as I think we've had in sports, be it the Olympics or anything else. This might be exaggerated here, but maybe since the Miracle on Ice.
And just to be clear, you're not saying it's like the Miracle on Ice. It's just one of the more huge moments we've had since then.
So here's the big difference, right? And I think this is why we haven't had another Miracle on Ice in so long. Who is the bad guy anymore, right? Like beating the USSR was not just about these college kids beating one of the best hockey teams ever assembled. It was the US versus the USSR. Think of everybody in that time that we have gone to war with. They're the little guy. Sure. And on top of that, they're not particularly good at a lot of sports. Right. So we haven't had that moment where it's like, oh, hell yes, finally, we beat Iraq.
Yeah.
But in this moment, this particular play, it was so unlikely, I guess, and it put the U.S. in a place where they had never been in rugby before, that it felt like one of those really patriotic moments in Team USA sports.
Yeah, I don't think you're far off there. Obviously, there's a huge difference between what happened back in 1980 and what's happening here. But in terms of like huge defining moments in the year since then, and again, I was not alive for the 16 years of Olympics between 1980 and 1996. But in the year since, yeah, I mean, we have the dominance of guys like Michael Phelps, obviously what Simone Biles and the Olympic gymnastics teams have been doing these past few years, as well as USA basketball. But yeah, I don't think we've had any true like insurmountable upsets like we kind of saw yesterday when it comes to American women's rugby. So yeah, I don't think you're too far off on that.
I think if you take it outside the realm of just the Olympics, I think for me anyway, and like the one that in my mind comes the closest is that 1999 Women's World Cup where they go to a shootout with China. But the Women's World Cup was so new that I don't think we had a gauge on whether or not China was, an equal to the United States, or if the United States had no business being in this position. I think it was a cool moment, don't get me wrong, and everybody that was watching remembers Brandi Chastain ripping her shirt off in celebration. It's become one of the more iconic moments of American sports, but this was a clear, this is not the U.S.'s game.
Sure.
And finally, we medal in it, and we medal in it in insane dramatic fashion. And
against a country like Australia that is very known for being one of the better countries in the entire world at rugby. And yes, it wasn't a gold medal game. It was bronze, but still to have a program with U.S. women's rugby that has never gotten anything like that in the history of being in the Olympics, to be able to do that in dramatic fashion was pretty neat. And again, I think we're talking more about rugby this week than maybe we've ever have before.
Right. Do you remember 2008 were the Olympics in Beijing that year, or was that London? It was Beijing. Yep. Okay. That swimming relay where the U.S. literally wins the gold medal because they touch the wall before, I would say it was France, but it might have been Australia. Anyway, it was one of those countries, but it was literally a matter of who got their finger on the right place first that determined the gold medal.
Sure.
That was another one of those moments. I would be interested if we open this up to listeners, what they would say, because I think this is such a personal thing, right? Of what is it that made you feel that feeling?
Yeah, so I guess defining Olympic moments since the Miracle on Ice back in 1980. And this is a personal one for me because of the wrestling connection, but I think a lot of people look at Kurt Angle's gold medal. I think he was against an Iranian in 1996. That was a pretty big deal.
That is not the wrestling moment I thought you were going to go with. I thought you were going to go with Rulon Gardner in, what was that, 2000?
That's another. That's another good one as well. I think more people kind of are aware of the Kurt Angle thing more than anything else, just because of his popularity later with his professional wrestling career. But a couple different ways you can go with that one for sure. But that's kind of one that pops in my mind. But yeah, if you have a different one, let us know. 883-404-6100.
I mean, the Dream Team obviously was something we had never seen before.
Right.
In 92, I think the dominance in 2008 of the Redeem Team was also a pretty big deal. I think there have been a lot of them, but I think I think the ingredient they all need is some element of we're not supposed to be here. I think that the Redeem team in '08, I think a big part of it was this idea that we had just given up on international competition. And now, you've got Kobe and LeBron playing on the same team because they don't want to be embarrassed like that again.
Right. So, again, let us know. Firehouse Subs text on 803-404-6100. We'll hit some of that when we come back to wrap up hour number one of the Extra Point, as well as a new brand or a new shape of chicken nuggets, at least coming out from the folks at Tyson. We'll hit that coming up next. He is Demetri Ravanos, joining me as he does each and every Wednesday. It is the Extra Point here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Demetri Ravanos along with you, wrapping up hour number one. We talked a lot of Olympics in the last segment there and posed the question, since the Miracle on Ice back in 1980, what are some defining moments that we've seen in regards to particularly Americans at the Olympics that may not necessarily be in the same category as that, but can nonetheless be remembered very well in the years that go by. We'll head out to the Love Chevrolet phone lines real quick. Joey actually weighs in. She had a pretty good submission here. Go ahead, Joey.
Hi. So it was the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, women's gymnastics, Carrie Strug. Who could forget when she did that vault and she landed it perfectly but clearly hurt her leg? She was even like on her knees crawling, crying in pain, made it down and had to do it one more time for the win. That was an amazing moment.
Joey, I'm only going to correct one thing. I'm only going to correct one thing, Joey. That was 96 in Atlanta.
Oh,
in
sorry.
92, the U.S. women won the bronze. But you're right. I mean, that is so much of that afterwards became iconic because of her tiny little voice, the visual of her coach carrying her off, because you're right. Like, she can't stand after landing that. I mean, it's a great submission.
Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate it there, Joey. And that might be one of the more replayed moments, certainly in modern Olympic history, because, again, I was barely alive at that point in time when that happened, but in my entire life, I've probably seen that clip 1,000 times of that happening.
And you know what? It's a really good snapshot of what the Olympics can be. Like, in that 2-week span, we are all glued to this thing. But, you know, you said you're a little bit younger. I guess I would ask Joey if she were still on the phone. I know she's not, but, like, do you remember Carrie Strug doing anything after? Like, I don't. I think she was on the NBC broadcast in 2000, but after that, she just sort of faded away. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the nature of the Olympics, that these people give us these moments that make you really proud to be rooting for the country you're rooting for. And then they just go back to life as normal Americans, unless they're a member of the Dream Team or the women's soccer team or something like that.
I also had a nameless texter that weighed in. Send me this article. It's from back in May. The Chiefs apparently signed a Welsh rugby player in Luis Rees-Zammit as a part of their international player pathway program. So we do still have some rugby representation in the NFL. I'm not sure what position he is expected to play, but as far as I know, he's still on the roster.
What's crazy, what has been crazy in watching all this rugby is clearly, like football, there are different body sizes and body types for different positions. But in rugby, man, they can all run 4.40s, it seems like.
Yeah, reading this article, it looks like they may involve him on kickoffs because the NFL has a new kickoff rule this year. So I don't know, maybe that's the pathway for more rugby players to find their way into the league.
I have read so much about, like, assistant coaches telling reporters, like, at least in year one, kickoffs are going to be chaos.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if it does open up a completely different way of thinking about kickoffs. Was it the Chiefs that I think are trying out other position players as kickoff specialists just to get another tackler on the field now?
Yeah, I think just kind of scanning this article, they also mentioned Travis Kelce is somebody that could become a little bit more involved with that, which, again, I'm very excited. I've never been more excited for a Hall of Fame game than tomorrow night, just to see this thing in action for the first time and see how it ends up working out. We got to get to this, as we talked about a moment ago. Tyson Foods is unveiling the Tyson Razorback Nuggets in select Walmarts and Sam's Clubs in the Arkansas and Missouri areas starting yesterday, actually. This ties into, obviously, the Tyson family's connection to the University of Arkansas, which essentially is the reason why John Calipari is the head basketball coach there now.
Right. John Tyson, and this is, I want to say, the third or fourth John Tyson that has been the head of the company, is an outspoken Arkansas booster. They have a ton of money. And when I saw this story, Tyler, the first thing I thought is, how is it that you can have an endless flow of money from the company that gets to dictate the shape of chicken nuggets, like that sort of level of importance, and you cannot field a competent football team? I
was going to say, I would have Uncle Sam beating down the door of the Tyson, plant every day that I could to see how much more money they could leverage out of them, because, again, Arkansas is a program that historically has been solid to even having some good years as well, making a couple of SEC championship games along the way. But yeah, the money is something they've obviously kind of fallen behind in these past couple of years, and you would think that connection would have made that really easy.
Listen, Tyler, I think that one thing we have to be really honest about, though, is we're coming up on 20 years since the Razorbacks have made an SEC championship game. When they have made SEC championship games, either it has been before LSU got rolling, or it has been in a year where either Alabama or Auburn are ineligible to play in the conference championship game. I thought the moment A&M joined the SEC, Arkansas really took a hit because part of their selling point to Texas players was this is how you get to the SEC and not have to leave or not have to be so far away from home.
Right.
Now that it's A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma, I don't know where Fayetteville even comes into the mind of the best high school football players in Texas. Like, I think that is, look, people around the conference point to Carolina this way. I always argue back. Look at all of the evidence. Arkansas is the most hopeless situation in the SEC right now.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. That one piece of leverage that they have is now kind of gone out the window. And yeah, unless they can pony up the dough or kind of gain equal footing with the new, player employment that we think's coming down the horizon, I don't see this getting any better for them.
I mean, look, they tried to even the playing field by hiring one of the best Texas high school football coaches ever. And in 2 years, they couldn't win a conference game with Chad Morris. I mean, it's got to be a miserable existence to be a Hogs fan and care more about football than basketball. At least you have some hope on the hardwood.
I was going to say, it's kind of one of those things that's almost kind of a reverse of what you have at Kentucky, because I feel like people want to be more passionate about football, but it ends up being Arkansas basketball that's been, better more often than not, at least over these past couple of years. Now you bring in a high-level coach like John Calipari, and who knows what they're going to be capable of.
Yeah, I mean, and look, they care. People don't wear those stupid hog hats because they're indifferent about the football team, right? I just don't know how you justify spending, forget your money, just even your time, when you know there's always going to be this ceiling on your program.
Well, I know one thing as we wrap up this hour, we're only a couple of Sam Pittman losses away from Bobby Petrino as interim head coach at Arkansas, which sign me up for that entertaining
What we've all been waiting for, yeah.
Plus, he'll probably not be allowed to be around the volleyball facility anymore. That's probably the one caveat there.
There you go. Whatever gets the job done.
Appreciate it as always, Dimitri. We'll check back in with you next week.
Yeah, you bet, Tyler. Thanks, man.
Hour number 2 coming up of the Extra Point. We'll dive into, speaking of the NFL, things going on with the NFL in regards to rule changes in college football. Dive into that coming up in hour number 2. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday on the game. Hour number 2, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the game on your Wednesday morning. Can appreciate our guy Dimitri Venis joining me as he does each and every Wednesday for a couple segments there. I want to get into this as we talked about, or I mentioned right there at the end of the last hour, there's a lot of difference between college football and the NFL, and there has been for a very long time. And in fact, there's a lot of people out there that will prefer one or the other. A lot of people here, in the South will say, I watch a lot of college football. I don't watch a lot of NFL football. A lot of people in, northern areas of the country and some areas of the Midwest as well, West Coast, may say, well, I watch a lot of NFL, but I don't really pay attention to college football. And that is something that's always been kind of odd to me, how you can watch one without the other. Maybe that's just the sports junkie in me, but some people have their preference of one or the other, and certainly in the South, very college football heavy, as college football's been around for a lot longer than the NFL has, down here, which creates some of those longer standing passions for respective teams as opposed to what you have with pro sports. But as time has gone on, the two games have gotten a lot more similar. You know what I mean? Where for a while there, the NFL was still very much the same across the board. And the type of offenses, the type of schemes they're running, the pro-style offense gets its name from being the way that most teams played offense for a long time in the NFL. And in college football is kind of where a lot of these West Coast real spread formations kind of gained a lot of steam, and eventually we saw that move its way over to the NFL as those players made the jump from college to the pros. So there's a lot of similarities in offensive and defensive styles in the NFL and college football, where originally there were similarities in that because a lot of college teams just ran pro style offenses, but again, college kind of started taking off in a different direction, and then the NFL eventually followed suit. And sometimes it can go both ways. Sometimes it's college football following after the NFL. It just kind of depends on what exactly we're talking about. Dan Lanning the other day was on Joe Klatt's podcast. He sits down with a lot of coaches in the offseason, and one particular thing that Dan Lanning talked about that really caught my attention is a desire, in his opinion, to have more uniformity across college football and the NFL. Here is what Dan Lanning had to say.
I would love if our rules reflected directly to the NFL rules, right?
Just across the board.
Yeah, timing-wise, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's the game that we're preparing, college players to go play after college ball. I think, right now the clock will stop after a first down and then run on the ready for play. I think with the amount of offensive coaches that there are in college football, I don't see that rule going anywhere because offensive coaches love the fact that the clock stops after first down, because now it's like an extra timeout almost if you're able to run up, hurry up offense. But the more we continue to transition our game to the same rules as the NFL, I think it would create some continuity.
So don't even get you started on the lineman downfield, illegal downfield.
It's something we've learned to deal with in the game, right? As long as it's called consistently, I think that's the one thing you'll see as you move conference to conference. Some things are called certain ways in some conferences that aren't called in the others. So the more we can be uniform in the way we call, from an officiating standpoint, I think the better the game gets.
I mean, we should have a national body of officiating.
Yeah.
Well, number one, why are conferences responsible for their anyways, listen, as I say on the show all the time, I digress.
And that clip was from the other day, and I assume Dan Lanning was aware of the new clock rules in college football, but maybe he needs a little refresher on that because as of last season, the clock no longer stops on first downs in college football, with the exception of the final 2 minutes of the first half, as well as the final 2 minutes of the game, which now, for those of you that may not remember this being enacted in the spring, this year in college football, we do have a 2-minute warning, which will serve as an additional timeout and kind of draws the line in the sand when it comes to resetting what the clock rules are. Because, again, once we get in those final 2 minutes of each half, you then do have the clock that stops on first down, as it had done for decades and decades in college football, to allow the chains to reset before it continues to roll. And for those of you that, again, maybe I'm telling you this for the first time, are worried that the 2-minute warning is going to just be another TV timeout, the way I understand it, with everything I've read up to this point, and we won't get to see this in action until week 0 here in a couple weeks, which I'm very interested to see, to make sure this is true. I do not believe the 2-minute warning is going to constitute another TV timeout. I just think it's purely going to be a stoppage of the clock. Maybe they'll run like a side-by-side 30-second ad while teams are in the huddle or whatever, but it's not going to constitute another full commercial break, unlike what the NFL does, which that's a designated TV timeout at the end of each half. But I want to ask you this question. Do you want to see more uniformity between college football and the NFL? Because if you're like me, your initial gut feeling says no, right? Because college football and the NFL have been very different for a long time. And a lot of that goes back to the clock rules, goes back to how they do overtime, goes back to the hash marks on the field, and so many different small nuances that maybe to the untrained eye, you think it's the same game of football. But for those that know ball, you understand that the games are vastly different and have been for a very long time. But at the same time, I see where Dan Lanning is coming from, especially as a coach who is, part of your job is preparing these guys to go up to the next level and play in the NFL. That would certainly make that transition from college to the pros a little bit easier. But I was thinking about this because I think when we're posed the question of, do you want to see college football become more like the NFL, it sounds kind of one-sided, right? Like we're just going to take all of the rules of the NFL, implement them into college football, and just make college football truly NFL light at that point in time. But I thought about it a little bit of a different way because, and I have opinions on this, you probably have some opinions yourself, there's a lot of rules in the NFL that I like better than rules in college, and a lot of rules in college that I like better than rules in the NFL. So it kind of begs the question to me, why can't we just take the best of both, combine them across both leagues, and create a better overall football product between college and the NFL? Bear with me here. So one of the rules that I think college does better than the NFL is the foot in bounds rule. In college football, you have to have 1 foot in bound for it to constitute a catch. In the NFL, you have to have 2 feet in bound to constitute a catch. Now, yes, there is a greater skill in trying to get both feet down, which is why that translates over to the NFL. But I think you open yourself up to more opportunity when it comes to catches and possessions with the 1 foot rule like college football does, which again, that's not going to change the game all that drastically, but I do think it's something that the NFL could stand to adopt in terms of the college football 1 foot rule. I'd love to see college football adopt the down by contact rule that the NFL has, because there's nothing sillier to me when watching college football. If you've got a breakaway run, right, and you trip over the turf monster, a blade of grass, it doesn't matter if the defender is 20 yards behind you in college football, you are down wherever you go down, regardless of what the means of bringing you to the ground was on your own volition, the turf or another player. In the NFL, if that same thing happens, you are not down until somebody touches you while you are down. And that has led to some great moments in NFL history, and I think it's something that college football could stand to adopt in terms of the down by contact rule. The NFL, I've said this for a long time, could stand to adopt college overtime. The NFL's overtime is a farce. It's kind of a joke at this point because it is not fair. Now, yes, they've done things to make it a little more fair, as opposed to back in the day where it was purely first team to score wins, where you'd have the team that wins the coin toss just try and get in field goal range and then kick the field goal and be done with it. They've at least made it where now you have to score a touchdown to win things in a sudden death scenario on your first possession. And if you only kick the field goal, the other team does get a chance to possess the ball. And now in the NFL postseason overtime, you do allow both teams the chance to possess the ball, which is something that they've been needing to do for a very, very long time. I think college overtime, and really college overtime before they went to the 2-point shootouts, was a better way to do it because that guaranteed possessions for both teams in a quick back and forth series by series type of situation. So that's something I think the NFL should have adopted a long time ago, but could certainly stand to adopt now. College football, I'd love to see them go to the longer extra point. Many people, was it 2015, I want to say it was, when the NFL experimented with moving or officially moved the extra point line back to the 15-yard line. And a lot of people are up in arms about it. I legitimately think it is the best rule change the NFL has ever made. And it makes what was a automatic, not exciting play very exciting and very important. How many times do we see kickers miss extra points now? How many times do you actually have to sit and watch the extra point because you don't know if it's going to go in or not? I think the NFL's done a fantastic job with that, and something I'd like to see college football maybe go to as well. Maybe don't go all the way back to 15. Maybe go to the 10 or the 12 or something like that, but just give it a little bit more of a challenge, because college kickers, while yes, are not as accurate as NFL kickers, they've become pretty darn accurate to where missing extra points is not something that happens a whole lot. And I think college football could stand to benefit from adopting such a rule. And the same scenario, as Dimitri and I talked about a few minutes ago, the NFL is getting set to dramatically overhaul its kickoff procedure, adopting a XFL, USFL, however you want to phrase it, style of kickoff, where the return team and the kickoff team are all going to be on one end of the field, and there's going to be a designated zone that the kickoff team's going to be lined up in with the returner back, and it's going to promote more returns, essentially. And I'm interested to see how it plays out. I don't want to definitively say that college football should adopt it as of yet until I see it in action at the NFL level, and how NFL special teams coordinators choose to attack this. But if it works out as it's intended to, I do think it's something that college football could stand to adopt themselves a little bit down the road. Kirby Smart talked about this a couple months back, that you have the reason the NFL eventually got to this is because touchbacks have gotten astronomically high in the NFL in the past handful of years. And college football, while not as many as the NFL, is certainly turning in that direction as well. So I think they could potentially stand to benefit from that being a rule change in college football, maybe a little bit further down the line. Big one for me here. The NFL could stand to adopt college football's 15-yard defensive pass interference penalty. Nothing infuriates me more than watching an NFL game than seeing a 40-yard throw that ends up in pass interference on the defense, completely flip field position, because in the NFL, defensive pass interference is a spot foul, as opposed to college football, where more often than not it is a 15-yard penalty, while still penalizing the defense, giving the offense an automatic first down, does not completely flip the field position like they do in the NFL. I definitely think that is something they could stand to adopt. And last one for me, this is a huge one. The targeting rule in college football is not perfect. It has never been perfect. It probably never will be perfect, but at least they review things, right? And I'm fine with erring on the side of caution. There are some egregious hits that look really nasty, look like helmet-to-helmet contact, and upon a quick replay, we see that they aren't. The NFL, for the decade plus that we've had these non-helmet-to-helmet contact rules, they still have not adopted an instant replay system to be able to overturn those things when they're clearly not called the right way. And again, I don't have a problem with erring on the side of caution if you open yourself the opportunity to be able to go back and look at it to confirm what you thought you saw was true, which again only takes a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes at most, to be able to say, okay, that wasn't a helmet hit. We're going to pick up the flag. We're going to negate the penalty yardage and continue on with the game of football. College football at least does that right, and I would love to see the NFL adopt that as well. So again, let me know on the Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100. Do you want to see the NFL and college football have a little more uniformity across the board when it comes to the rules in both respective games of football? I'll try and get to some of those a little bit later on in the show. Dimitri and I, we spoke to Paul Feinbaum on Monday on the halftime show, talking to him about a variety of things, one of those being the potential push for parity in this new 12-team college football playoff. I'll let you hear a little bit of what he had to say about that and dive into that conversation of what parity could look like going forward in this new era of college football. That's coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. We'll get to Paul Feinbaum's thoughts on parity in college football in just a moment, but continuing on with our conversation as it relates to uniformity and rules between the college and the NFL. Our guy Ray wanted to weigh in on a rule change that he thinks should be made when it comes to kickoffs. Ray, appreciate your time this morning. What's on your mind?
Hey, man, yeah, thanks a lot. Hey, just to go back on the Arkansas thing before I get to the rule change, they also have Walmart money coming in. So, man, they should have an aisle budget that, that rivals anybody, but that's just my 2 cents there. But going back to the rule change, I think the one thing I'd like to see college do is kick the ball off the same place the NFL does. Back it up 10 yards, good land, and take the fair catch out of it. I mean, I think that's part of football. I know it saves injuries and that kind of thing. But if you move that ball back 10 yards, I mean, these kickers are already kicking out of the stadium.
Right.
Move back 10 yards, take the fair catch out, and let the return game mean something to the game again, But, hey, man, thanks for letting me chime in, buddy.
Absolutely. Appreciate the call, Ray. Ray, one of our regular callers there. And that kind of goes back to I'm hesitant about this because I want to see it actually, be used first, which we'll get the first look at it in tomorrow night's Hall of Fame game. But the new NFL kickoff rules, and I went back to double check on this before we came back on here, the way it works, and you're still kicking off from the 35-yard line in the NFL, but now any ball that is fielded in the field of play, so between where the return team lines up and where the return and the goal line, if it's caught anywhere there, you have to return it. There is no more, I believe, fair catching between the goal line and the 20 or 30-yard line like there's been in the NFL the past couple of years. Now, if the ball gets kicked into the end zone, you can have a touchback there. So if a return man is standing in the end zone and catches the ball there, that can be a touchback. Or if the ball sails out of the back of the end zone like it's been forever, that will also be a touchback. The way the rule suggests, though, I think this is what the key part of it is, it's incentivizing NFL kickers to kick the ball into the field of play to force the return man to return the ball. There's also a higher penalty now because the touchback, instead of being at the 25-yard line, will now be moved up to the 30-yard line. So my thinking on this is, and this is why the NFL probably made this rule change, they're trying to get kickers to kick it into the field of play more, which, again, we'll get to see on display this year in the NFL and potentially maybe coming down the road to college football as well. And Ray was also very right on that Arkansas has the Walmart connection as well. The Walton family is connected to to the university there too. So you would think between that and between the Tyson chicken nugget money that they would have NIL resources out the where, but for whatever reason they have not up to this point. And we'll see how they can potentially adapt as a structure of college football and college sports as a whole does indeed change. All right, back to Paul Feinbaum's thoughts when he was on with Dimitri and myself earlier on this week as we get set to enter a new era of college football. I posed the question to him, is there any fear that maybe the College Football Playoff Committee will try and force parity to, exemplify the fact that we're in a new age and the SEC and the Big Ten may not have the dominance that they want?
Yeah, I'm afraid of that because, think of this committee as the UN. It's a worthless organization, but they still show up every day, and they end up screwing up peace sometimes or whatever else. And I think that's the problem because you get all the college administrators are all smart in their own lane, but you put them together and they get stuck with groupthink and that's a really good story. It's too bad. Let's get two schools from the Big 12 in because they're such a downtrodden conference, or the ACC. That's not the way it should be. I don't think they're going to go into it though saying we have to limit the Big Ten and the SEC. But I also think if you had to ask me what's a number, I think 3 from each, and could one get 4? Absolutely. But I think all of us, all the pundits who you and I talk to every day, SEC's definitely got 4. They have no idea what they're talking about.
And it's an interesting way to look at it. And look, trying to guess what a committee of people is going to decide on is very, very hard, particularly when you have such a significant change in the format like this, to where in most years of the 4-team college football playoff, the job was kind of done for them. Right? Like we had a specific set of things that could happen, typically going into conference championship game weekend, and more often than not, things stayed to status quo to where the decision was not all that hard in terms of who got in the college football playoff and who got left out. This past year, with the Florida State, Alabama, Georgia situation, that was when their hand was really forced. They made the decision to keep Alabama in or put Alabama in and to move out Florida State and Georgia, and then everything blew up. But of course, we know that the 12-team format was on the horizon to where you could only get so mad because you knew change was coming, regardless of what happened last year or not. But when we talk about expansion, when we talk about a 12-team playoff, it pushes forward this idea of inclusion, right? To where there's a lot of conferences, rightfully so, in their opinion, that feel like they've been overlooked because of bias towards the SEC, which has gotten multiple teams into the college football playoff before, and the Big Ten, which has also gotten multiple teams into the college football playoff before, to where, all right, we're going to expand out to 12. Yes, every conference is guaranteed to have a, conference champion in based on the automatic qualifier, but that opens up, once you add in the group of 5 school as well, 7 at-large spots. And the thinking would be, hey, pretty uniform across the board, maybe 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams, 2 ACC or Big 12 teams, then one more team, one more team from Big 12 or ACC or whatever it may be. But I don't know if that's the case. And a lot of us think that maybe the SEC will grab 4 spots. Maybe the Big Ten will grab 4 spots, to where there's just not going to be any room for these other conferences, which, once again, will cause them to be up in arms and them to be upset with the fact that even in an expanded playoff, they can't seem to get enough representation and they're outside of their conference champion. Will that happen? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought to see, because trying to guess what the playoff committee is going to do is so hard, especially year to year, because the committee changes a lot, and the criteria of what they're looking for in teams being represented in the playoff also changes a lot. So it's kind of a moving target, but I would not be shocked if, at least in the first year of the 12-team college football playoff, to be able to say, we're so different, maybe you put in that 10-2 Big 12 team with a little bit of a weaker schedule, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe a 9-3 Missouri. Well, maybe Missouri's not the best example there because they have a weaker schedule in the SEC, but maybe a 9-3 SEC team that was kind of right there on the fringe, because it involves more of the conferences across the board. Now, yes, the Big Ten and the SEC are the biggest money makers, so maybe there's the incentive of wanting more of them in because you're going to have more interest. I don't know. It's tough to speculate on, because we're just going to have to wait and see what happens when December does indeed roll around. But keep an eye on that, because forcing parity may be something that's on the agenda of the College Football Playoff Committee in this upcoming year. Mind you, once again, the best Gamecock sports moment since 2000 is live on our Twitter poll, as it's been all week. A new poll each and every day. Have another one coming up tomorrow. We'll take the 4 winners from this week, translate them over to another list coming up next week, and then we'll announce our winner and talk about it on Monday, August the 12th, all sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. It is Wednesday, and though they are off for the Olympic break, it's time to talk some racing with our friend Jen Jensen from the early game. That is coming up next. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. We do it each and every Wednesday. Jen Jensen from the early game joining me to talk a little bit of racing. Unfortunately, Jen, for the next at least week and a half, we don't have any racing to talk about as NASCAR is on its 2-week Olympic break because NBC, who does the second half of the NASCAR season, is busy covering all things Paris. I got to ask, how was your first off weekend without any racing?
You know, it was so bizarre because usually I mentally prepare, okay, you know, this is going on in the morning on Sunday, this is going on, but I've got to be where, okay, by 4 o'clock, I'm done. Or what time? Let me double check.
Sure.
So it was strange not to plan your day around race time.
I feel like I had a lot more time to actually get things done this weekend, which I suppose is probably a good thing. But I did miss having racing on TV, and you know, this year we don't even get the supplement of something like an SRX on a Thursday night or something like we had last year to scratch that itch a little bit.
A little bit of withdrawal for sure. I did watch a little bit of the racing. Oh my gosh, drawing a blank. But you know, where the like funny car type racing,
NHRA,
drag racing, yeah. And did watch a little bit of that this weekend. So at least had a little bit of some kind of power, so that was fun.
Well, the cool thing about like YouTube now is you can go back and watch just about any race that your heart desires from any race, really from the early 90s on, if you just really want to kind of scratch that itch of seeing some kind of racing on TV, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there are options these days where 20 years ago might not have been so much.
So when we do get back to the track at Richmond coming up next weekend, we're going to have 4 races to go until the start of NASCAR's playoffs. This can be Richmond, Michigan, Daytona, and then Darlington, the Southern 500, to wrap up NASCAR's regular season before we jump in to the 10-race playoffs to decide the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion. And I posed this question to you yesterday because we weren't going to have any actual racing to talk about this week. We've been doing this playoff elimination format for 10 years now. So 2014 was the first year that we had multiple rounds. You dropped 4 drivers each round, and you had this winner-take-all finale at the end of the season. And it's been very controversial to many fans, traditional fans, new fans, all that kind of stuff, as the means of deciding a champion. But there's no denying it does create excitement, which is what NASCAR's entire goal of that was to do. And quite frankly, I don't see it probably ever going away, especially from, again, that drama standpoint. And it's something that can drive TV numbers in a certain way, which I think NBC's pleased with.
Oh, I definitely think that they're pleased with that. And, if you think about it, pretty much every other sport has a playoff of some sort. So it kind of makes sense that, okay, they do it as well. And, again, the purists probably aren't as big a fans. But like you said, there is drama when it's only this many races, so you have 4 more chances to win your way in if you're not within enough points. And, I really kind of like what it does to the competition.
I've gotten to the point with it, and I was on the fence about it when it was first introduced back in 2014, but I've accepted it for what it is. Is it the best way to determine a champion? Not necessarily, but it is exciting, and it does create different strategies and stuff like that for how the teams manage their playoff points and how they manage races in the particular rounds to try and get themselves all the way to the Final Fours. It's enjoyable for what it is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't sit here and beat my chest saying it's the worst thing in the world, but again, I've just kind of accepted it for what it is. And I will say, when they went with stages and playoff points, I think that helped it out a little bit more than the original iteration that didn't have those kind of things. They created some more controversial eliminations in those earlier rounds.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm also glad we did away with the names of the rounds, like the Challenger, the
Contender, Eliminator. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, that just seemed kind of like over the top. Like, you don't have to sell it to me that much, but that lasted 2 seasons, and that went away. So they were at least listening and tweaking and have continued to kind of do that.
So since we've been doing this for 10 years, I pose the question to you: what are some of the best years we've seen of this particular format? We don't have to go all the way through all 10 or have a list like that necessarily, but what really kind of springs to mind to me at the top of the list personally really had to be 2014, the first year we did this, where we went in with so many questions, so many unknowns of how this format was going to work out. And I think about, the multiple fights that we had, Keselowski and Brad Keselowski and Matt Kenseth, Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski at Texas. We had the drama of Brad Keselowski having to win the elimination race at Talladega, the first Final Four race where Kevin Harvick has to beat Ryan Newman on a restart. Like, it checked just about every box you could have expected in the first year of that format.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. And the fact that really with Newman, he didn't win any races, and he almost won the championship with having a winless streak that entire season because of the way the point system worked. And that, I think, I don't know if that would have made, immediately being the first year, if that would have made them totally rethink everything, or if it's just the point of, hey, you may not have won races, but you've performed it really at a high level for the entire season. I don't know that I have a problem with somebody winning a championship if they've had, many top fives and top tens to where they're, number one, number two in points. I know up to, I think, the last race, he was like sixth in points or something. But I don't think I honestly don't think there's a problem with that. I don't think you have to just totally win and get in, because you do have flukes of Darlingtons or the Daytonas or a Talladega where, okay, Ricky Stenhouse, is he really ever that competitive as far as being, sorry, Reggie Anderson, but, being where he's contending for a championship? Not really. So
right.
Does he deserve to have a playoff spot if he lucks out to one win because the big one happened and he made his way matriculated to the front?
Well, and that's the good thing, like I said, about playoff points, that it kind of weeds out those that maybe just won one race off of a fluke or something like that, as opposed to those that do run consistently throughout the entire year. So we don't have as many controversial, placers when it comes to the Final Four at the end of the year. When you move on from 2016, which, again, I think just set the bar insanely high to where even 2015 was a little bit more of a disappointment the year after that, I'm particularly fond of 2016 as well. You obviously have the story of Jimmy Johnson winning his 7th title, had the drama in the final race of what ended up being Carl Edwards' last stand in NASCAR, with him getting wrecked on the late restart there. You had some good elimination races like at Talladega, or not elimination race at Talladega, but some races like that throughout the playoffs that provided a lot of excitement. And then you cap it off with another historic championship for Jimmy Johnson as well.
Yeah, I think that was exciting. There were a lot of elements, and again, we're a little more established in the protocols of how the events, how the playoffs ran. And like you said, I mean, to crown Jimmy Johnson with his 7th and final win of the championship series, I think that made it a really good year. And like you said, all the drama that happened throughout the season.
One of the more recent ones, I go back to the first year of the Next Gen car back in 2022. We saw something that we had, quite frankly, never really seen before, where almost half of the playoff races were won by guys not currently still competing for the championship, including that entire first round, which went to Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace, and Chris Buescher. It's like, well, these guys aren't even factors for the championship. We'd never seen anything like that before in this playoff system.
Yeah, that was a very unusual time, and but it also gave you an opportunity to think, okay, again, win one and you're in the playoffs, so that could happen at any time, in the first part of the season or whatever. And it does give an opportunity for people who might not get into the playoffs. They could end up getting into the playoffs by just getting a win. I have mixed reviews on that. I don't necessarily want to see somebody that hasn't, should a newcomer, should a rookie be in the playoffs if they've only gotten, one win? But yet it's kind of cool to see some of the young guns get an opportunity. So I don't know. And
who could forget, of course, about the Hail Melon with Ross Chastain getting himself into the Final Four, and perhaps one of the more spectacular moves we've ever seen on a racetrack. And we won't see again, but, Hey, he made it worth it for that time period, for that moment at least. No, he really did. And again, it got people talking about the sport, and there's never a bad thing. So anything that is unusual, anything that's drama, it just brings eyes to the screen. Absolutely. And again, that's just a couple of different scenarios of the versions of this playoff format that we've seen over the past 10 years. And I really hope, and I'm intrigued to see with kind of a couple different contenders up at the front right now, how exciting this upcoming playoffs can be, which we'll dive in a little bit more as we get closer to it. But it's certainly shaping up for, the Kyle Larsons, the Denny Hamlins, the Chase Elliott's, the Christopher Bells to all be serious contenders for this championship over that 10-week run. Yep, and then to see some of the names that you may not see in there unless they get a win, like a Kyle Busch or something, that's just going to seem so odd. But he's has to win his way in for sure. Absolutely. So we will see what happens. We'll have some more racing to talk about next week as we look ahead to Richmond, those final 4 races of the regular season before getting into the playoffs. And we'll check back in with you next week. Appreciate it as always, Jen.
I love it. Thanks so much, Tyler.
All right, Jen Jensen again from the early game talking racing as we do each and every Wednesday here on The Extra Point. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point, hit some of your Firehouse subs text as we had some conversations earlier in the show about similarities between college football and the NFL and some rule changes potentially there as well. It's all coming up. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Your chance to win a lot and I mean a lot, of tickets to see South Carolina sports is on 1075thegame.com with the ultimate season ticket giveaway. Could win tickets to every home football game, every home baseball game, as well as every home men and women's basketball game for the 2024-2025 sports calendar year. All brought to you by your friends over at the Men's Clinic. Again, just go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win. And just like last year, we're going to take 3 finalists. We're going to bring you out to our summer golf tournament at the Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia coming up the end of August. And we're going to announce the finalists, or excuse me, the overall winner there on that day. So again, go online to 1075thegame.com and enter for your chance to win. We'll hit some text here on the Firehouse Subs text line at 3404-6100. Reference some things we've been talking about during the show. Nameless Texter says, given the number of players that don't make the NFL, I think college should adopt the rules that are good for college, not necessarily to prepare the few that make the NFL for the NFL. Neither league's rules are complicated, and that is from Burner. It's an interesting thought. And you're right, there are the vast majority of players that play in college are not going to be going to the NFL, where they don't have to worry about that transition necessarily of staying with the same type of rules they would have played in with college. And there was a pretty significant difference in the rule sets between college and the NFL for a long time. They are becoming more and more similar. And as I ran through a little bit earlier, there are still a good handful of rules that differentiate the two. And my suggestion wasn't necessarily coming from the standpoint of wanting there to be uniformity to help those players make the transition from college to the NFL. I think that's a little bit more of what Dan Lanning was pointing out in that conversation that he had with Joel Klatt in reference to wanting the rules to be a little more uniform between the two respective levels of football. But my thing was just trying to make the best game of football possible by combining the best rules from both sides to create more a unified product, but one that highlights both of the best sets of rules from each side. But again, it's up to your own interpretation. Do I think college football will ever get exactly like the NFL? Probably not. The reason that they changed the clock rules and all that were truly for the total length of games, which is something that every league has been trying to adjust to for a very long time. We see, Major League Baseball with the pitch clock, which is significantly reduced the amount of games, this year. I know they had an MLB game yesterday. I think between the Yankees and the Phillies that went 12. That was the longest game time-wise of the entire year, and it went 3 hours and 51 minutes. I mean, there were some 9-inning games in years past that went longer than that. You know what I mean? So the MLB's done a good job of trimming down the total game times, and the NFL has almost gotten game times down to an exact science, to where if you watch a game at 1 o'clock and there's a 4:05 game coming up after it, well, guess what? Your game is going at 1 o'clock is going to end right at about 4. Same thing with if you have a 1 o'clock game at 4:25 after it. Well, guess what? That 1 o'clock game is going to last somewhere between 3 hours and 15 to 3 hours and 20 to be out right in time before the 4:25 game. So it's become very scientific. I think college football is kind of going that way as well. Now, the frustrating part about what college football has done with timing rules is it has not diminished the total amount of time watching the game. So, college football games run somewhere around 3.5 hours typically. And if running the clock on first down suddenly meant we were trimming 30, 40 minutes off the game time, that's one thing. But the fact the game times have not changed all that much because now you're just adding in more commercials to supplement for that, I think that's the frustrating part that I don't think is productive enough for the game of football itself. Had another texter weighed in here. Let's get to it. The nameless texter says, JB Hunt Trucking is also a big contributor to Arkansas too. That is kind of the confusing thing, that going back to our conversation with Dimitri an hour ago with Tyson Chicken Nuggets having new hog shapes because of the Tyson's connection to Arkansas athletics, which is a big reason why John Calipari is now the head coach of Arkansas, because they basically wrote him a big check and said, hey, come and coach for us and leave Kentucky behind. But between Tyson, between Walmart and the connections the Walton family has to Arkansas, and now apparently JB Hunt Trucking as well, you would think that Arkansas might be in a position to just be absolutely killing it on the NIL front. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every available piece of money that these companies making suddenly going to go to the University of Arkansas. But as we've seen in plenty of other places, those ties to the university for these companies can be very lucrative in how they leverage things from an NIL standpoint. Now, how does that change as we go into the new era, potentially starting in 2025, of players becoming employees? I don't know. Is it more advantageous for a school like Arkansas to have those kind of connections to help them out with those kind of things? I don't know that either. We're going to have to wait and see on that. But it is, I feel like, potentially a missed opportunity, especially as you look at the state that program is in right now with Sam Pittman, kind of being a dead man walking going into the season. It's like, man, if they could have leveraged a little bit more of those opportunities they had with these respective companies, who knows how successful Arkansas could be for a program that, as Demetri pointed out, yeah, they made a couple of SEC title games, but the powers that be in the SEC West at the time were not either the powers that they would become or eligible for the postseason that that allowed Arkansas the opportunity to make those respective SEC championship games. So I don't know. It's interesting to see. Again, Arkansas is not a team that South Carolina has to worry about, but one that I think we're all going to be keeping our eyes on to see if Uncle Sam's going to last at all there at Arkansas or make it to the end of the season for that matter. That's going to do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll get back into today's greatest Gamecock moments since the year 2000. What are your options, and which way do we think the vote's going to go? That's all coming up. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head on your Wednesday on the game. 11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, along with you here on the game, navigating through this last day of July, getting set for August tomorrow and the start of fall camp. But more importantly, guys, we have another list of greatest Gamecock moments since the year 2000. Have you guys taken a look at today's selections yet?
Nope. Coming in fresh.
Coming in
with no preconceived opinions.
Have not. I feel like we need a sounder.
Yeah, we do.
Probably wouldn't have been a bad idea, though. That is not my department. Not my department.
You do everything else around here,
I do everything
Tyler.
else around here, but not that. Today's options, and again, this is brought to you by our friends at Columbia Craft on Green Street down in the Vista. Again, you can go online to 1075 The Game's Twitter page and vote for today's options of women's basketball's national title this year against Iowa, completing the perfect season. Football's win over Alabama in 2010, taking down a number 1 team. The Clowney hit in the Outback Bowl versus Michigan. And Cardoso's 3 to save the perfect season against Tennessee at the SEC tournament.
So yesterday, I'm going to call somebody out. Can't remember the name. Respectfully call out, that is. I don't know if they're listening or just watching the 1075 The Game Twitter, but somebody accused the station of not showing any love to the women's basketball program.
Okay.
I think maybe the thought was that this was literally like you just kind of scrolling through and see this poll and don't realize that it's like a series of polls.
Right.
So
4 days.
Could have been an honest mistake. Yeah, multiple days, as you said. But for that person, you can now be happy because there are 2 inclusions from the women's basketball program. Wow. So the Clowney hit is interesting from the standpoint of most, like the other, Cardoso's 3 won the game.
Yes.
It was at the buzzer. When you win a title versus Iowa or you beat Alabama, like these are wins or championships. But the point is they're wins. The Clowney hit contributed to the win. It wasn't the winning moment. And you're not saying, hey, when South Carolina beat Michigan. You're picking kind of a moment. So that actually makes it a little bit more interesting to me. And honestly, maybe a little bit harder to pick. Because as far as hits go, like that is an iconic moment. Like a snapshot in time. How many times has that thing been replayed, not just here in Columbia, but how many times has it been replayed on the national stage? Still, years later, when college football season rolls around, people are showing that clip because it's just an iconic moment in sports, like so many others. You know, somebody, Woodson doing the Heisman post. Like, there's so many different things. That's one of them.
Would you argue that the hit is a bigger deal to the more national sense of South Carolina football than it is to the actual bubble here, which, again, it's still a big deal, but I think people make more a case of it outside of here than here necessarily. Is that fair to say?
I think it obviously went national.
Yeah.
But I think people make a pretty big deal about it around here as well. Like I think, how sometimes something happens and maybe don't kind of process the gravity of it right off the bat. I'm not saying when it happened you knew that this thing was going to still be talked about like a decade later, but I do feel like you were like, we just witnessed a moment. That was a moment. And I was actually in the press box for that game. And dude, it was buzzing up there. Like like everybody, like when something big happens, there's this little like the murmur gets louder where just everybody is talking about it. And it was one of those moments. I tell you what gives it some added juice, though. For one, it was in a bowl game. It wasn't in a national title game, but it was in a bowl game, a fairly high-profile bowl game. It was Clowney, so it wasn't just a random player that maybe Gamecock fans know, but people outside of the bubble didn't know. It was Jadeveon Clowney, number one prospect in the country out of high school, and, of course, ultimately number one pick in the draft. So that adds something to it. But how about the context of the fact? Tyler, do you know the context?
I know the context.
As a non-Gamecock, you know the context?
I'm well aware of the context. They should have had the ball before that, and Spurrier losing his mind over them being spotted short and still getting the ball is forever a memorable moment from that standpoint.
One of the worst calls in Gamecock football history. So to follow it up with this iconic, the ultimate ball don't lie moment in the history of football.
Tirico's call of South Carolina deserves to have it, and they do. Perfectly encapsulates it.
And Tirico on the spot.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know about you, but my brain is not firing fast enough to just lay that out there.
Yeah.
In a millisecond.
That's why Tirico gets to host the Olympics. You know.
How good is that call?
Amazing.
It would have been easy to, in the moment, just have, called what happened, but not add that context to it. He not only thinks of it, but delivers it perfectly.
Well, and we talked about this when you were out last week, Wes. Somehow or another, I don't remember how, Tyler, this play came up. And you remember at first I called it a theory, and I had to correct myself. Brad Lawing, the late, great Brad Lawing, gave his take on what happened, and he said that the official just literally pointed the wrong way and had to go with it, so he didn't look like a dummy. Now, that backfired because, kind of looked like a dummy. But that was his – he was firm in that. Like, they had been told after the fact. Like, they got some after-action report or something saying that's what happened. I couldn't say for sure, but that's what he said. So – yeah, there's just so many things. Like you said, Wes, not just the play itself, which was incredible, but the backstory to it, like what happened before, the play itself, the call, the fact that South Carolina went on and won the game. It was huge.
So, guys, I was fixing the camera when you first gave the list, Tyler.
Yeah.
So I didn't even catch, and I just pulled it up on Twitter. If you want to vote, by the way, it is at 1075 The Game on Twitter X. So the women's basketball, I didn't catch you say that the title. I heard you say the Cardoso 3.
Yes.
Title win over Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the context there. The most watched women's basketball game in the history of the sport.
Right.
A revenge game, if you will. A perfect season that, even if you had high hopes for this team with everything they lost, nobody, let's not rewrite history, nobody was predicting South Carolina to go undefeated on the way to a national title. I'm sure there are some hardcore fans that were probably like, hey, we're going to be better than people think. And still, let's not pretend like they were picked 30th in the country. They were still like a top 5, top 6 team in the preseason, even with everything they lost. But to do it in the most just perfect way and to beat Caitlin Clark, who sent you home the year before, we got a battle on our hands in terms of today's poll. Like, I don't know if there's an obvious answer. And we haven't even really talked about the football win over Alabama in 2010, which was one of the most iconic moments in South Carolina kind of modern football history, in my opinion.
Well, and I go to talk about the women's basketball national championship. We talked about earlier on in the week where you had the option of the first College World Series title and then the second one yesterday. It's like, okay, well, maybe the second one isn't as important as people's minds because you've already won one. This would be in the context of the third national championship, but the context around it being undefeated, beating Caitlin Clark in a revenge game, the most watched women's basketball game of all time. There's a lot more layers to this than the previous national championships, which were great, obviously, but this one might be viewed as the most special of them all.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Tyler. Did we seed these behind the scenes, or are they random in terms of how they're paired?
That's a question for Elijah. He's the one that puts the poll out every single night. So I'm not privy to that information.
Okay. Would you tell us if you were?
I would.
Okay.
I'm going to make it up and project it. Like, I feel like the way they're listed 1 through 4 could be the seeding in this.
Yeah.
Because I immediately eliminated the Cardoso 3, as awesome as that was. That was the first up. If you got to pick one, right? Like, that was first up on the chopping block. As awesome as the Clowney hit was, again.
You're eliminating it that quickly?
Not quickly. We've been blabbing about it for 10 minutes.
From the standpoint that it was a single moment as opposed to an overall win.
But, I mean, it's legendary South Carolina sports moment.
That's true.
It's not sports win. It's not title. So, I don't know. I'm still going back and forth.
This wasn't made to be easy.
No, what I'm getting to is I think there's like 3 1 seeds in this.
Yes. They're very close.
These could have been 1 seeds in other. Like, there are 3 picks here that are going to beat out a lot of the ones we have already talked about if they were spread out, but they're in the same poll. By the way, we've got Ace Sanders.
We do.
Coming up. I think, Tyler, we should get to Ace, but then I think we should revisit this entire thing after we talk to Ace. And we can ask Ace what it was like being on those teams with Clowney.
We can absolutely do that. We'll do that coming up next, to be exact. And again, you can go online to 1075 The Game's Twitter page. Vote on the poll for the best Gamecock sports moment since 2000. Another one coming up tomorrow. And again, we'll have another poll next week to announce the winner coming up on August 12th, sponsored by Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in Vista. Ace Sanders coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
Yeah. Good.
And this number we have for Ace, that's correct, right?
All right, it's lunchtime here on The Game, the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, of course, presented every day to you by Larry Chandler and our friends over at Firehouse Subs. 14 convenient locations all around the Midlands. And look, if you want lunch, great. You can use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online. But if you're like, man, I've already got lunch plans today, that's okay. We'll forgive you. You can also check out Firehouse Subs for dinner for the whole family, or catering for that event that you've got coming up. They make it super easy to check out their menu, browse all the options they have, some of your Firehouse Subs favorites, or maybe something new that you haven't tried. Of course, they've also got catering platters that you can hit up for your event that you've got coming up. FirehouseSubs.com, or use our favorite method. Download the Firehouse Subs app. You can sign up for a free account and earn yourself some rewards on future purchases. It's a win-win. Avoid the wait and order online. 14 different convenient locations, FirehouseSubs.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on the game. Is so excited to be joined by today's special guest on Love Chevrolet phone lines, a former South Carolina wide receiver, a member of some of those great teams with Jadeveon Clowney. We'll get to some of that in a moment. Ace Sanders. Ace, first of all, appreciate you taking your time for us today. We know you're busy, especially considering the fact you are the new head coach down at Bayshore High School. I imagine things are ramping up, approaching the start of the high school football season.
Yeah. First off, thank you for having me. But, I am pretty wrapped up in my first stint as a high school coach in general. So some new things I'm getting used to, getting adapted to. But, I found some time here, so here we are.
Yeah, Ace, hey, man, this is Wes. Appreciate you doing this. And I did want to ask you about kind of stepping into a different role as a head coach now, as a former player. What do you think your coaching style is going to be, man? I know you're around some great coaches, I'm sure, from the high school level to then Steve Spurrier, of course, in college, playing in the NFL. What do you think kind of your coaching style is going to be as you get to mold this program into your own?
It's pretty much to be more relatable. I'm pretty much stepping into a community that I grew up in, and I've been around the community probably for the last 6-7 years, and kind of just paying attention to the lay of the land and just how everything is shaping up around in my community. So I'm at a school that I can kind of be more of a mentor to, as well as someone who has played on multiple levels, can kind of give them more insight. So it's really just being more relatable to my guys.
Hey, it's Chris Clark here. Good to hear from you, man. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this. We were talking about one of your many highlight reel plays in the last segment before you came on, and for my money, one of the best moments in Gamecock sports history, and that was your 70-yard punt return against Georgia. And I've actually got it queued up here, watching it back again. And a couple different things about this play. First, how do you look back and remember that play? And then secondly, I've always thought it's interesting, you didn't normally bobble the ball on a punt. You had a little bit of a bobble. It kind of hits the ground. Do you think that actually helped the play and kind of threw off the rhythm of the defense? Or I've always wanted to ask you that.
I honestly, I can't really say. All I knew is that, like you said, I didn't really have many bobbles. So when it happened, it was in my head. It was just pick the ball up fast as you can. Pick the ball up fast as you can. And from there, if I go back and I watch the replay of it, it does seem like that first guy who was coming down kind of hesitated a bit, which, he's hesitating, and I'm thinking pick the ball up fast as you can. Just bought me a little bit of time to make a move, but I don't know if it maybe it did. You have to interview one of them if you got a chance to. Maybe it did throw him off, but my mind was on pick that ball up and not slow the momentum of this game down. So just looking back on that play, it was set up kind of movie-like. Like I said, the defense was on fire that game, and I just remember Shaq Wilson just coming to me telling me, like, look, we got him backed up. We're going to get him off the field. I just need you to, pretty much just do what you do. Like, I promise we're going to get him off the field. We're going to get to that fourth down situation. They're going to have to kick you the ball. And he just told me, just do what you do. It played, fast forward. Next thing I know, we're right in the position. And he look over to the sideline and look at me. I'm like, oh, okay. So pretty much from that point, they delivered. And I just really felt like I had to deliver, which was my main goal once I dropped the ball, because that was a drop. It wasn't even a bobble. I dropped the ball. To just pick it up, make this guy miss. But once I split and got down the middle, it was like, oh, yeah, I could see the path easily. I knew I had to make the amount of moves I had to make to get up to the sideline and just outrun everybody else. It was magical. What I remember most is just the student section going crazy, like, as I'm running down that sideline. Because I didn't score a lot of touchdowns, like, in my career going down that sideline. So I went into the student section. So it was, like, one of the first times. And it was like, oh, man, so that's exactly what they see running down on this end, the Jumbotron. I was like, this is crazy. So kind of like my eyes were everywhere. Like, it was a lot going on. It was a whole lot going on. So it was amazing, man.
Yeah, Ace, you mentioned, wanting to keep the momentum going. That was, y'all just took control of that game from the start, it felt like. And I remember When you scored, it was kind of like this feeling in the stadium of South Carolina is not losing this game. Like it's just not going to happen. Did you? Ace, I've been going to games since I was a kid. That might be the single loudest moment. Like it felt like the whole thing was going to just crumble.
Crumble, yeah.
What was it like? Could you feel the gravity of like the situation and just how much energy was running through that stadium? Kind of as you said, as you scored, and then you could just look around. The entire place is going nuts. What was it like looking up and being on the sideline right after you had scored?
It was like that. Like you said, the only other time I've seen a stadium that chaotic was the opening kickoff when we played Florida. The Bows ran that kickoff back, and like I said, you could feel the ground shaking in Williams-Brice, like when I scored that touchdown. So it kind of made me look back like Shaq knew, like that would be the dagger if I did that. He knew. Mm-hmm. He knew that would be the dagger. So I didn't fit until I crossed the goal line. Like I said, I looked up, and it was just like, I think we blacked out the Jumbotron. I think everything. I think that was, it's kind of inexplainable. I don't even, just had to be there.
Yeah, it was special, man. So you obviously had a lot of long returns and some big touchdowns as well in the receiving game. Was that your favorite play that you had personally, or what would you say was your favorite play you made at South Carolina while you were here?
Even though I didn't score, it'd be against LSU. 2012 LSU, that return was my favorite return. Just because for me, it was more personal due to the people that I knew were in on that play, like on the defense. The very first time I had to split two defenders on that play, it was because Mingo and what's my safety? He wore number 1. He was really good at LSU.
Is it Reed?
Yes, yeah. Reed. Honey
Chris.
Badger was out that game. Yeah, they had a lot of just top players on that team. So it was just to do that against them. It was kind of personally was my favorite return.
We were talking earlier too. You played with so many great players at South Carolina. Jadeveon Clowney, Connor Shaw. The list goes on and on. We could spend 5 minutes listing all the guys, but just how was it playing with that many great? You mentioned some guys you played against. You played against a bunch of great players, but also with. What was that experience like at South Carolina, just getting the opportunity to do that and go through kind of the golden era of ball here in Columbia?
Shoot, man, like you said, we can name that list for days of players but it's just practices, man. Like I tell people all the time, like I've never been a part of. I had 2 times in my life where I've been a part of just intense practices based on just the competition level, not just the guys just being as good as they are, it's just the fact of how competitive they are too. And that's my youth league team. I had 1 year one of my youth league teams was just, and a lot of us went on to be, to make it on to the NFL as well. But those South Carolina practices they taught me the most. Like I said, just how to compete. They competed, like I said, Stephon Gilmore. I had to compete against Stephon Gilmore, Chris Culliver, CeCe Whitlock, Akeem McGusty, DJ Behringer, Devontae Holloman, Antonio Allen, having to go against stuff like that every single day, and they all do something different. It kept you on your toes. It just molded you into something that you probably never saw yourself becoming.
And Ace, we got about 2 minutes left here. We've been talking about the Clowney hit on our greatest sports or Gamecock moments since the year 2000. In about 120 seconds, can you give us your account of how that went down from your perspective?
Shoot, it went down like a car crash. I'll be honest with you. It was just, I didn't see it live on the field. I was watching the screen. I was watching the actual screen. So when it happened so fast, and it was just all based off that bad call. So everybody, all the receivers, we were sitting on the bench kind of like huddled up, just, discussing stuff, still sharing emotions from the bad call. And then it was just like, boom. And you just heard the stadium go like, it went dead for a minute, like, whoa, what just happened? You know what I mean? You see the guy's helmet roll, and then you just see Clowney grab the ball. I'm just like, oh, this is I think this is his coming out right here. This is his real coming out. They showed it was able to, kind of highlight the type of player he is and where he could be impactful from. And like I said, it flipped the whole game. It flipped the entire game.
Well, it's a moment that we certainly won't ever forget. Appreciate you taking a little bit of your time for us this morning, and certainly want to wish you the best luck in your first season as head coach down there at Bayshore in Florida.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Again, Ace Sanders, a Gamecock great, again, down there, the first-year head coach in Bayshore in Florida. We'll come back. We got to get back into this list of Gamecock moments since the year 2000, as today's list is the most controversial of all this week. It's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here on The Game.
No, we got a lot of social media users listening to the program or even watching the stream, which, of course, our guys at Integrated Media set up for us. So if you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, do yourself a favor. Go check out Integrated Media Columbia, underscores in between each of those words. Integrated Media Columbia on Instagram, Integrated Media Columbia on Facebook. And that's where you can go to learn more about Michael and Nathan and their team and what they do at Integrated Media. Some awesome inspiration photos of all sorts of audio-visual projects, smart home systems, wireless speakers. They've tricked out man caves. They've tricked out patios with new TVs, Sonos wireless speakers. They make sure that people have great internet signals so that they can stream on multiple devices throughout their households. Go check them out, or you can give them a call, 803-948-8327. You don't have to use the big box stores. You can source your equipment right here in the Midlands locally, and they can install it for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on your Wednesday. Reminder, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway is back on 1075thegame.com. It's your chance to win tickets to every home football, baseball, men's and women's basketball games for the upcoming sports calendar year. And just like last year, we're going to take 3 finalists, bring you out to our summer golf event at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia coming up at the end of next month, and we will crown one true winner there. So again, go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway. We have to get back into this list because this one is the most controversial of all the ones we've had this week of greatest Gamecock moments since the year 2000. Today's options, once again, are women's basketball's national championship this year, taking out Iowa, completing the perfect season. Football's win over top-ranked Alabama back in 2010. The Clowney hit versus Michigan in the Outback Bowl. And Camila Cardoso's three-pointer to save the perfect season against Tennessee in the semifinals of the SEC tournament. Again, we haven't even scratched the surface of what is one of the most important wins in the history of Gamecock football, that being that upset of Alabama back in 2010 that I think we spent a whole half hour talking about when we had Steven Garcia in here, however many months ago that was.
Yeah, obviously, I think when Gamecock fans are having that discussion about what's your most memorable game you went to at Williams-Brice, ultimately, the Georgia game we were talking about earlier, some older fans maybe go back to, it's like knocking off Georgia in 2000 when South Carolina hadn't won an SEC game in forever. But this game right here, like the win over Alabama, it was kind of it would be number one on a lot of people's lists, I feel like.
There's some little iconic mini moments even within that game. Like the best one, I think, is Alshon's one-handed catch down the sideline. I think that was on Dre Kirkpatrick, who, by the way, has a kid now going to Alabama, so we're all definitely getting old. And there's that great picture of an exasperated Nick Saban, like at an angle on the sideline, throwing his hands up, like, how did that guy do that, type of thing.
That wasn't bad.
Chris has been working on that one.
I've been working on it a little bit. I'm trying to work on a Kirby, but it's hard.
We gotta say program right.
Was Kirby on that staff?
Yeah, he was.
He in the background of that
I think
too?
he was,
Or was he in the box?
I feel like he might have been there. I just remember Saban. He's got the classic Saban, like, look of frustration, like, well, that's just Alshon Jeffrey. But, that right there was an iconic moment. You think the little that little angle route that Spurrier had that he got from NCAA or Madden playbook to Marcus Lattimore. They just it was just such a great game. Defense came up big. Bama came back later in the game like they were making a run. South Carolina stymied the run.
Alshon catches the onside kick and
runs
then
it back.
Decides to just about run it all the way back. How about the first Alshon touchdown?
Yeah.
That ball was put into a window the size of a football. And you know what the forgotten moment of that game is? The Garcia safety to start the half, where I don't care what any of you say. I know all of you had that little bit of thought in the back of your mind. If you're listening, you're a Gamecock fan, you were like, here we go. Here we go. We've given them the opening.
Everybody did.
To come back. Because it was a bad snap, but then Garcia recovered it and just tossed it basically off the goalpost. And you're sitting there like, this might not be good. But what do y'all think is going to win this?
Would you like to know what's currently leading the results right now?
What do you think is leading, Chris?
I'm going to guess that the Bama game is leading.
That is correct. 40% of the vote with the win over Alabama. Clowney hits actually number 2 at 26. Women's basketball title this year versus Iowa at 23. Cardoso's 3 versus Tennessee, currently sitting at 11th. Or excuse me, 11%.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought that, except for, I could have seen 2 and 3 switch. But, again, people have, rightfully so, a very emotional attachment to that Clowney hit. Like, it is so iconic as an individual moment snapshot, within a game. It really is.
I'm looking here. I think Greg McElroy actually threw for a career high that day against South Carolina, 315 yards. That was not his MO of playing quarterback at Alabama. I don't think he ever topped that in his time in college.
But that's
nope,
good.
Correction. He threw for 377 against Auburn that year. Yeah. But I believe those are his only 2 300-yard games.
Well, and you look at that on the surface and go, wow, but remember like that era of football, and that was still a little bit more in the ground and pound era, like a little bit more. And you remember the running backs that Alabama had on the field. The Ellis Johnson, who was the DC at the time, I still remember listening to him talk leading into that week, and it was Ingram and Trent Richardson, right? It was Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson.
Yep.
And he's like, I mean, those guys are just bulls. Like, he called them bulls. And they did a pretty good job, like, held those guys in check. And, I remember talking to Ellis, I think it was like last year, interviewed him for a multi-part series, and he was looking back on that game and thought, it was going to be a huge challenge. But he said we legitimately thought we could win, but we had to control those two guys.
Ingram and Richardson combined to only run for 64 yards on 17 carries that day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, South Carolina, if you want to talk about like game flow and situational pressure, South Carolina pretty much controlled that game throughout and kept Alabama out of a rhythm and, forced them to go. It feels like just got them out of their game plan. And, that's really what you have to do. It was what a special moment. Just like how many times have South Carolina fans, because that was game day on the Horseshoe that day, right?
Yeah.
How many times have South Carolina fans got their hopes up and just been punched in the face, basically?
Mm-hmm.
That day just felt like, much like the Georgia game, a couple of years later, that game just felt like everything went right for South Carolina in the big picture. Do y'all add any context to that win? In that, I'll say two sides of context. The context of you did win the East that year. So if you don't have that win,
yeah,
you don't win the East. The other side of context I'll add, losing to Kentucky the very next week.
Many would say that was predictable.
Yeah.
Are we voting now, or are we going to wait till later? Like, we have to vote, right? We have to say what we're going to pick. Or are we chickening out?
No, we have to. We have to.
Should we examine Cardoso's 3 just to be fair to wrap up the show?
Yeah.
Since we haven't given a lot of time.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
We'll do that. Coming up next, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday on the Game.
All right, guys, you already know it, but we're going to remind you, our friends over at Gold Line Framing, they want to handle any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. Maybe you've got a signed print that you want to kind of just take to the next level. Let them throw a frame on it. You can put it on the wall in the man cave and take it to the next level. They've been in business for over 20 years. 511 12th Street, West Columbia is the address. In store, if you're looking for more gift ideas, they've got an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items all right there. If you want to go ahead and set something up, you already know that you want to have something framed, call them today. Number is 803-739-1337. My friends Kendall Walsh and Joni James, they're going to take outstanding care of you just like they do us whenever we're over there at the store for a live show. Again, that's our friends over at Gold Line Framing, handling any and all of your custom framing needs. That number again, 803-739-1337.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Metro, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes here on your Wednesday, examining the most controversial list of options we have on the greatest Gamecock moment since 2000 for this week's poll. The one thing we've not gotten to on this poll so far is currently in last place, but it is Camilo Cardoso's game-winning three-pointer to push South Carolina past Tennessee 74-73 in the SEC tournament semifinals this year, which helped preserve the perfect season, which of course led to South Carolina winning the national championship against Iowa. This one kind of falls in to that same category of, like, we brought up with the Clemson games in the College World Series a couple years ago, that yes, that is obviously very important that you beat Clemson on the way to winning the College World Series, but it was just kind of a step along the way. This maybe takes on a little bit of a deeper meaning because it helped you preserve the perfect season. Even if you lose that game, you still have all the opportunity in front of you to run the table and win the entire thing. But being able to preserve the first perfect season in South Carolina women's basketball history does make this a very significant moment.
It does. And, I think it's maybe even more significant because you had won 2 titles. And, I mean, you're almost sitting there going, like, what else? What else can this group add to their resume? What else can this program add to its resume other than just winning more titles, like stacking titles or doing it back-to-back, I guess, would maybe be the next step. But in terms of just tangible results, like, what else can they do? To me, it was have a season where you are literally perfect. And, we judge athletics based on your record. So no matter what happens along the way, if you won every single game that was put in front of you, you go down in history as being perfect. So that's rare. That's rare for Little League teams. You know what I'm saying? So to do it at the highest level is incredibly impressive. And without this moment, it doesn't happen. So there is some gravity to the moment. It also, it being your center as opposed to, a guard, it being her first three-pointer at South Carolina.
First three-point attempted at South Carolina. She had not shot one since she was at Syracuse.
Yeah, so that tells you the context of it. Now, I tend to think you're voting. You're not voting now. I guess 11% of you did, but for the most part, you're not voting, in my opinion, for this moment over the win over Iowa. No, you're not. Yeah, I don't think that you're in a spot where if you're going to vote for the women's basketball in this poll, the beating Iowa, beating Caitlin Clark, that moment is going to surpass this moment, in my opinion.
It's a championship. The Iowa game's a championship. Now, SEC tournament, right? Ultimately, I see this Cardoso play as a little bit more of one of those snapshots, kind of like the Clowney hit, and there's a deeper meaning to it, for sure. And it's like one of those iconic, memorable plays. So where do we land on this?
This one's a struggle for me, guys. I'm not going to lie to you.
I feel like, and maybe this goes into the 11% that voted for it, if you were there to see it in person, if maybe you didn't go to the national championship game, but you went to see the SEC tournament and you saw this in person, that's probably going to hold a little more weight for you because you got to be part of the experience of one of the more memorable moments of the entire season. But if you're just the average person that maybe watched this on the couch at home or at a party or whatever, I fail to see how this one could beat the title itself. That's my best guess here.
Yeah. So I think Chris was asking, where do we stand?
Number one.
Like, where do we stand on, like, what's the pick? What's your vote?
You go first.
Oh, okay, Tyler.
Tyler is the host/producer, so he gets to decide. He punted to you.
Okay.
Time for Ace Sanders to step up and return this thing.
We need Shaq Wilson to give us a pep talk before, apparently. I never knew that part of the story.
No,
but
I'm not surprised, though.
Now he's coaching. Makes sense.
Yep.
Oh, man. First of all, I'm going to go yell at Elijah because I think these could have been separated out. I think these
What do you mean?
These could have been separated into different polls. Like if this was a tournament,
these could have all been ones.
Is this a tournament?
I mean, in a way, we take the top 4 into next week.
Okay.
Maybe we need a consolation poll on Friday for those that just missed the cut. Maybe I can bring that up.
If this was a tournament, then these matchups deserve to be not in the opening round, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I have to pick one. Give me the win over Alabama.
Yeah, I think I've changed my mind throughout the show. I think I got to take the Bama win, too.
Hard to argue with that. National title, definitely a second, but I go win over Bama in 2010 as number 1. Clear across the board, clean sweep. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself, Michael Espy, coming up next on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, if you're having an issue with your home's HVAC unit, make sure you give my guy Justin Krantz and his team at Krantz Cooling and Heating an opportunity to come out and look at it. Several reasons to do it, actually. Well, they've been out to my home, so I can personally attest to the fact that Krantz Cooling and Heating does an outstanding job. They also do free second opinions on coil leaks and compressors. So if you've had another company come out, give you a quote, you thought it was a little off, maybe it's too high, maybe you don't think it's solving your problem, just let Krantz Cooling and Heating come out and verify it for you. They will give you that free second opinion on coil leaks or compressors. And another reason to go with them, since